The sea before Dragonstone lay black as melted glass, a mirror only for the moon and the smoldering clouds that wandered across it, heavy with unseen thunder. Night had slipped past its quietest hour, that precarious heartbeat between dream and dawn, yet the castle riding the island's jagged spine was already awake. In a wind-scoured courtyard, Daenerys Targaryen stood barefoot upon volcanic stone that still breathed yesterday's heat. Her hair, silver gold and unbound, flickered about her face like threads of living ore. The air smelled of salt and lightning. It tasted of brine tinged with sulfur rising from fissures deep below, the island's secret breath mingling with her own. Beneath her soles, the ancient rock throbbed faintly, alive with pulses of buried fire. She knelt, laid a palm against the rough surface, and closed her eyes. Far underneath, magma shifted and murmured, promising heat enough to unmake the world. She needed no translator for that language. It was the language of dragons, of inevitability and change, and it answered the quickening in her veins with a whisper older than any crown. Change had carried her here from the edge of the Dothraki Sea, across the narrow sea, through the broken citadels of men. It had painted her banners in red and black, and set her upon thrones of fire and sorrow alike. Yet never had change felt so intimate, so chosen, as it did this morning. She was no longer a girl driven by prophecy and desperation. She was a queen who might shape the very metal that shapes the fates of kings. Behind her, in corridors carved with winged shadows, the new smiths were rising. They were blacksmiths from the Stormlands, armorers out of Gulltown, apprentices from Qohor, and a single terse weaponsmith from Tyrosh who claimed thin, flickering blood of the dragon lords of old. They had filled a forgotten seam of chambers below the keep, with anvils, crucibles, and towering bellows. Each night the glow beneath the floor gratings burned brighter, fed by the breath of her children. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Valyrian had taken easily to the sound of hammers. They roosted in the lower vaults like living furnaces, content to lend flame whenever called. She thought of the sword waiting to be remade. Longclaw lay upon an oaken trestle in the great hall, its blade bare wolf's head pommel, angled toward the unrisen sun as though the steel strained for first light. Jon Snow had placed it there on their first evening ashore, saying that a sword once sworn to the Night's Watch should feel Dragonfire, if it was truly to serve a Targaryen cause. Jon. Aegon, though the name still caught like a burr in her throat, had spoken quietly, his gray eyes fixed on the sword, his voice tinged with reverence and something like farewell. And yet he had asked nothing in return. Jon Snow had never been a man to ask. Measured footfalls tapped across the stones behind her, unhurried and familiar. She turned before the guards announced him, knowing the cadence of that stride better than her own pulse. He came cloaked against the chill, black wool lined with crimson silk, the color subtle as a secret where moonlight licked the folds. Damp sea air curled his dark hair. Starlight limned his profile in silver. "You're abroad early," Jon said, voice pitched low so it would not carry. "Or late," she answered smiling. "The Forge heiresses such distinctions." He stepped beside her at the parapet. Together, they watched the horizon ink itself with a line of pewter. The first hint of dawn. Silence lingered between them, full of unspoken plans, half-formed fears, and the sure knowledge that neither stood alone. Below, a gull cried over the rocks. From the bowels of the keep rose lazy coils of smoke, where last night's trial smelts cooled in pig-iron molds. The world seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the first hammer-stroke of morning. Jon withdrew a small oilskin packet from beneath his cloak. "The Maester pried more pages from that sealed Valyrian scroll," he said. "Symbols, half-words. I can't read them. But Maester Kyrian swears they map the word of bonding, the glyph that seals Valyrian steel." Her pulse quickened. "Let me see." They unrolled the brittle vellum on a ledge bathed in violet pre-dawn. Ink the color of old blood curled into characters that shimmered when the light kissed them. Lines neither wholly painted nor entirely etched, as though they sank deeper than the surface. Daenerys traced a single glyph with a fingertip and warmth tingled up her arm, alive and intimate. She understood none of what she saw. Yet understanding felt beside the point. Knowing was etched in bone. "Will Razdar come?" Jon asked, meaning Benero's pupil. A scar-throated red priest Marwyn had spirited from Volantis. Razdar spoke little, yet the few words he shared hinted at mastery of both flame and faith. "He prays," Daenerys replied. "He says, prayer tempers the soul before fire tempers the blade." She let her hand drop from the parchment, met Jon's gaze. "And you? Are you tempered? Numb?" And a crooked smile tugged his mouth. "I have stood before ice and walked through fire. If I'm not tempered by now, my love, I never will be." She would have kissed him had the iron bell not tolled below. Shift changed, calling the day crew to relieve the night. Torches flared in the stairwell. Men and women shuffled downward, shoulders bowed beneath tool bundles. Voices hushed. The smell of soot and singed leather drifted upward like faint ghosts. Daenerys felt their rhythm in her chest. Each hammer blow would become a drumbeat in a march that must carry beyond Dragonstone, over the wall, into histories yet unwritten. She lifted the scroll. "Come," she said, and Jon followed. The foundry corridor still bore scorch scars from the day Drogon's patience had worn thin at a careless apprentice. Patches of black glass clung to the walls where stone had melted. Torches now flickered over those wounded surfaces, turning them into living mirrors. Proof that dragons had returned, that impossibility could once more be forged in mortal hands. Deep within, a vast vaulted hall hewn ages ago by dragonglass pick and sorcerous flame waited. Chains pulsed dull red among unseen rafters. At its heart rose a dais of black basalt, ringed by channels etched with twisting glyphs. Molten metal would soon flow through those grooves like blood through veins. Razdar knelt beside the dais, fingers splayed upon stone, humming in a tongue older than old Kiz. Candlelight caught the scar that ringed his throat, a pale serpent twisting when he breathed. Around him, master smiths positioned crucibles of raw iron, folded Kahoric billet, and strange dust gleamed from the smoking sea. Star tears, traders called them, shards that rang like glass when struck. Longclaw waited upright at the dais foot, point set into a narrow socket, as though the blade were a key awaiting the world's turning. Forgay glow swam along its dark surface. Reflections drifted like oil on deep water. Daenerys and Jon crossed the threshold. The smiths glanced up, bowed in silence, then resumed their preparations. Courtesy yielded to urgency. News from the north grew worse. Dead things stirred in the frost fangs. Wildling raiders vanished east of Hardhome, and a wind like a colder tongue of doom carried whispers across the shivering sea. Winter had come, and something older than winter marched within it. Razdar rose. "All is readied," he rasped, voice thin from the wound that had once nearly stolen his life. "The blood glyph demands royal tongues, one of fire, one of ice." Jon's brows knit. "Ice? You were born of ice," Razdar said, "and of fire. A song sung in flesh. Your breath will open the gate. Hers will bar it." Daenerys searched Jon's face. "Do you trust him?" "I trust you," Jon answered. Razdar offered each a narrow dagger honed to whisper thinness. "Blood seals all pacts," he intoned. They had spilled blood before. Sacrificial, accidental, victorious, but never like this. Ceremony made the gesture intimate. Daenerys sliced her palm. Rubies of crimson welled, bright against bronze skin. Jon mirrored her. Together, they extended their hands above the rune-getched channels. Blood met superheated stone with a hiss. Golden lines awoke, racing outward, mapping a pulsing heart of light. Razdar began to chant. The smiths raised hammers. Along the flue shafts far above, Drogon's shadow stirred. Daenerys felt her children's attention tighten, a chord thrumming across distance and stone. With a silent beckon, she summoned them. A gust of wet thunder shook the hall as Drogon unfurled from darkness, vast as a cathedral nave, scales burning duskward, eyes twin hearths. Rhaegal banked behind, green-gold belly reflecting furnace light. Valyrian glided pale as new frost along the far alcove. Wings folded, talons clacked. Hot air fanned embers into riot. Jon did not flinch, though the dragon's exhalation stirred his cloak. He had faced wights, giants, and betrayal. What was one more myth made flesh? Rezar pointed to the scroll. "My queen, speak." The glyphs writhed under her gaze and arranged themselves into a shape. Her bones remembered, though her mind had no words. When she spoke, the syllables crackled, each a spark on stone. As the final word fell, silence swallowed the forge, utter and absolute. Even dragons held their breath. A resonance answered from the depths. Basalt vibrated beneath their feet like a plucked string. The molten gold in the runnels blazed, too bright for mortal sight. Drogon inhaled. Half the hall's air rushed into cavernous lungs, then exhaled a beam of white fire so fierce it erased color. Crucibles shattered, iron, star metal, and humble steel vaporized, pouring into the channels as an incandescent torrent. Longclaw drank the molten river. First its edge glowed, then its core blossomed with living constellations. Daenerys felt something tug within her chest. Part of herself poured into that unearthly bloom. Jon stepped near. Blood still dripped from his palm, hissing into steam upon the air. Fixing his eyes on the sword, he spoke, not Westerosi, nor Valyrian, nor any tongue she knew. It was older and raw, a note so deep, it seemed to belong to the marrow of the world. Steel screamed. Longclaw bent, liquefied, collapsed, then surged back. Glass smooth, edges glittering with dawn colors. A twin serpent of metal spiraled around the core, two rivers of light within one bed. The air tasted of pine snows and desert heat. At last, Drogon's maw closed. The forge sighed back into cherry-dark glow. Runes cooled. Slag cracked to reveal impossible filigree. The reborn blade hovered an instant before settling into its cradle. Steam rose like the last breath of a storm spent. "Take it," Daenerys whispered. Jon's fingers closed around the wolf's head hilt. At his touch the blade shimmered, ripples of blue and red warring then wedding. In its reflection she saw not the bastard of Winterfell nor the hidden son of Rhaegar, but a man claimed by dragon and direwolf alike. The prince that was promised, not by prophecy but by choice and daring and love. Razdar exhaled shakily. "One blade is forged," he rasped. "The song owns many verses. Tonight we have sung only the first." Daenerys knew he spoke true. For every unliving thing that shambled beyond the wall, a sister blade would be needed. Their work was only a babe. The winter marching south was a grown giant. Yet hope had been cast in steel, glowing in Jon's grasp. He ran a thumb along the new fuller. "It feels lighter." "Its weight is possibility," she said. His small, unarmored smile melted all distances between them. Her hand rose to his cheek, warm with forgeflush. "We are not alone," she murmured. "Never," he promised. Behind them hammers rang anew. Apprentices scraped precious slag. The forge lived again. Yet wrapped in the hush of their joining, the lovers heard only each other. Hours later, when first triumph cooled into the steadier rhythm of planning, they convened in the solar above maps and ledgers. Davos' battered voice drifted from the yard where he drilled raw recruits in shield wall tactics. Tyrion hunched over parchment, scowling at candle law counts as if numbers could repel the Night King. Ravens bearing Sansa's sigil arrived with news of grain rerouted south. Lady Mormont's terse scrawl followed promising every Bear Island sword. Sunlight remained reluctant, hanging low and amber through ash-stained windows. Every breath Daenerys took still tasted of forge smoke and Jon's nearness. She forced herself to the parchment. "We'll need iron sand," she said, marking deposits along the Mander Delta. "And smiths who can learn the glyphs in days, not moons." Tyrion tapped an ink-stained quill. "Glyphs queens have. Time they do not." Zaporsti. Jon laid the unnamed blade upon the table. It flashed cobalt at the edges. "Reports out of Last Hearth say the dead breached the gift near Queen's Crown. 2 weeks, maybe 3, if the snows favor them." Davos limped in, wiping sweat. "If we hold them at the neck." "What garrison?" Tyrion countered. "Moat Kaelin stones more moss than men." Numbers and leagues tangled across the map, but Daenerys listened, offering commands. But her thoughts circled back to melt and fold, pattern and possibility. She imagined forges flaring down the white knife, each tended by small dragons varying flame. Swords lifted skyward, singing in a tongue older than memory. Yet dragons could not haunt every hearth. Another way must be found. Night fell again, though daylight had barely warmed. Wind clawed shutters. Wolves howled across Blackwater Bay, driven south on unnatural gusts. On the parapet, Missandei waited, cloak drawn tight. Beacon light striped the water in gold ribbons. Daenerys watched the lines race like hounds over waves, seeking a dawn that would not come soon. "You're restless," Missandei said. "There's a door before me that will not open fast enough." Daenerys replied, "One blade will not win a war." "True," Missandei allowed. "But even butterflies break storms if they fly long enough." Daenerys smiled. "And not the wisdom suits you." Her gaze sharpened. "Tell me honestly, does this forging frighten you?" Missandei considered. "The power does. The cost more so. But failure frightens me most, and failure comes if we do nothing." Footsteps approached. Jon, carrying 2 steaming mugs of mulled wine. Missandei excused herself, leaving them inside a ring of torchlight. "They honed the edge," he said, handing her a cup. "Razor fine." She inhaled cloves and orange. "Have you named it?" "I hoped we might name it together." Her heart twisted pleasantly. "Let it earn its name." He sipped. "During the forging I felt something reach into me, like the blade drank my marrow." She nodded. "Magic always takes its tithe. Will it take more?" "Yes. Of us both." She met his eyes. "But I'll pay anything short of you." He laughed softly. "Ever the queen. Ever the girl who walked into a pyre for love of life and came out with dragons," she corrected. "It changed everything and nothing. I am still Daenerys. Only now I know impossible things bend when we do not." Lightning bruised clouds offshore. Wind snapped her hair. Dragon circled unseen above. The forge's pulse drummed low in her bones. Jon set his cup aside and caught both her hands, calluses warm. "When the war is done," he murmured, "what future do you see?" "I see a hall whose doors never bar the hungry," she said after a breath. "Children laughing at my accent. Dragons sleeping in meadows, no army Mars. Medicine Sagalor. A sword above the hearth?" he teased. "Those we will melt for plows," she said. Though her smile confessed, they both doubted such peace. Thunder cracked. Rain's scent rushed in. Jon drew her toward the inner passage. Their shadows merged on the walls, braided by torchlight. Hearts, like steel, might be folded through hardship into something that sang truer. In the forge below, the night crew refined sand iron with limestone and starglass. Razdar mapped new channels, linking glyph to glyph with a cherry-glowing chisel. Faces streaked with soot yet bright with purpose bent over tasks. The feat they had witnessed had lit a blaze deeper than coals. From a gallery Daenerys watched while Jon conferred with the priest. Spear points for the Dothraki, short blades for Bear Island scouts, arrowheads for Ghost's Watch archers. All would carry some fragment of tonight's craft. She gripped the rail. Hammer's tremors rose through bone to blood. Far below, tectonic murmurs answered. The forge was alive. A heart the realm had forgotten. It had waited only for someone who would lay ear to chest and listen. Real dawn finally crawled over the sea, borne on rain-damp wind smelling of ash and promise. It found Daenerys dozing beside the dais, cloak pulled close, Drogon a gargantuan curve of muscle and obsidian scale curled behind her like a watchful mountain. Jon slept too, back against the dragon's warmth, the new sword across his knees. Workers tread softly around them, reverent. Daenerys woke first. Her heart leapt without warning, and then she saw the reason. A sliver of polished steel resting beside the dais, fresh-cooled shimmering violet into frosted silver. Not yet honed, but already beautiful. She picked it up. Feather light, heavy with resolve. Jon stirred. Another piece. The first of many. She crouched, tracing the shard's edge. Small forges at White Harbor, Torhen Square, Barrow Hall. Anywhere ships bring ore. Dragons lend breath, depart. Within a moon the north could lift 1,000 blades like this. And the south? Jon rose, stretching. Tarth's mines feed the Reach forges. This hall will birth weapons for Unsullied and Dothraki alike. If Cersei sees sense, she may. She will not, Jon said. Then she must stand aside or melt the same. Drogon shifted, mirroring his mother's rising ire. Daenerys exhaled slowly. We've not come this far to let old feuds freeze a new dawn. Jon's hand settled on her shoulder. We'll do it together. Yes. Fingers closed over the shard. Together. They shared a small, quiet smile. All day its memory hovered behind her ribs like a private sun, even as council called and claws of duty dragged them apart. Evening dimmed yet again. A raven arrived. The dead had crossed the last river. Maidenpool burned with eerie green fire. Terrified folk choked the King's Road. Daenerys read the parchment before a hearth, where star-glass dust was being ground fine. The weight of history pressed close. She folded the message, slid it beneath the new blade's pommel, and turned to the smiths. Tonight, she said, voice like struck iron, we forge not for tomorrow, but for today. Hammers rose. Dragons roared. Blood met fire and sang a song so old the very walls remembered. Beyond Dragonstone, winter honed its claws. But in the smoking heart of the island, a brighter age began to beat. Bold as dawn on steel, shaped by two souls who dared believe night itself could be cleft, if only they struck true, and struck together. Xia Ondei. The forge fires of Dragonstone flared through 3 nights without respite. A heartbeat of crimson pulsing at the island's core. Each cycle of bell tolls brought fresh crews. Soot-dark hands from the Stormlander smithies. Apprentice armorers smelling of salt and gull droppings who had sailed from Gulltown. Even a wizened maestro of Qohor, famous for folding steel 108 times until it sang like crystal. Hammers rang in complex counterpoint, echoing through the labyrinth of vaulted tunnels. Each anvil strike another syllable in a language older than ruin. Daenerys moved among them like a spirit of flame, bare-armed despite the furnace heat, braids pinned tight so nothing of her silver-gold hair would stray into the sparks. Where she stepped, men and women straightened spines. When she bent to correct a grip or trace a glyph in chalk across a blade still soft with dull red glow, they swallowed fear and dared to believe the impossible might truly be wrought. Jon stood often at her shoulder, half guardian, half student. He walked the aisles between anvils, repeating the glyphs under his breath in a cadence Missandei had shaped. Ice-pure syllables for iron, fire-clipped consonants for starglass. He slept little and ate less. Davos Raider joked that the king in the north was turning into a blacksmith's ghost, but the jest carried an edge. Jon had survived knives in the dark, arrows in the snow, even a spear through his heart. Now he feared dying by hours lost to forging when winter's jaws closed. On the 4th dawn, lightning crawled spider-quick across a bruised purple sky. Rain hammered down the cliff faces in shining sheets. Beneath that roar, Daenerys and Jon convened a council so hastily summoned that Tyrion arrived in a half-buttoned doublet, parchment still clinging to his elbow where he had slept upon budget tables. Grey Worm entered last, armor damp, eyes unreadable. Daenerys unrolled a simple scrap of leather on the war table. A rough map of the continent marred by fresh inky scars. This line, she said, voice low but ringing, marks the dead's advance as of yesterday's raven. Last hearth is ash. Carhold stands abandoned, its garrison scattered south. White Harbor braces behind flooded dikes, but Lord Manderley writes he has perhaps 10 days of stores if refugees keep pouring in. Tyrion pinched the bridge of his nose. Let me guess. Queen Cersei sent no levies north? None, Jon answered. Grey Worm cleared his throat. The Golden Company marches west along the Blackwater with Lannister banners. Scouts say they dig siege pits as they go. Davos spat into the cold hearth. Fools. They'll hold bright banners over empty bones if the Night King takes the neck. Missandei stepped forward, unfurling a second parchment. We propose a chain of traveling hearth forges, she said. Each small, built upon barges drawn by river current or oxen teams. Dragons lend flame, but smiths need only coal once the channels are primed. Steel for spearheads, arrowheads, and short swords can be poured and quenched on the march. Tyrion's brows rose. Portable Valyrian smithies. Expensive and daring. My favorite combination. Daenerys met his gaze. Expensive is meaningless if the world ends. We have coffers from Astapor and Marine yet unspent, and the Taroshi bankers, ship anchored in the bay. Gold can burn for all I care. Flesh will freeze. Nowhere. Jon tapped the map. Do. The forges follow two lines. One rides the King's Road with the main host. The other sails upriver to Moat Cailin. The neck is narrow marsh. Steel arrowheads tipped with dragon glass can hold the choke point for a fortnight while Winterfell fortifies. Assuming Winterfell stands, muttered Tyrion, feathering quill over numbers. Daenerys laid a hand on the dwarf's sleeve. It will. Tell me what you require to make these barges float. Tyrion looked up, eyes bright despite shadows beneath them. Timber yards in the arbor can deliver hulls pre-shaped. I'll need a dozen shipwrights, 2 galley captains who don't faint at the word ice, and enough pitch to coat the 7 hells. Dawn Shipyard in Old Town has 3 idle cogs. If Samwell's father spares them. Randall Tarley is in open rebellion, Jon said tersely. He bent the knee to Cersei. Then we steal them, Daenerys said. Grey Worm inclined his head. Unsullied can take the yards tonight. Tyrion allowed himself a thin smile. At last. A plan that requires only boldness. Meanwhile, far north of Dragonstone's comfort of flame and fellowship, the Night King tipped a broken spear into the chalky soil near the banks of the Swiftwater. The weapon's haft, carved from heart-tree wood still veined in red sap, pierced the sand with a quiet sigh. Around him, ravens lifted off blackened branches in a startled fury, wheeling into a sky the color of stale iron. He watched their circle tighten, silent, patient, then lifted one narrow hand. The birds froze mid-wing beat, spinning helplessly upon the air like torn scraps of shadow. Ice-filmed feathers. When they fell, they shattered against stones like glass. He turned without a word. Columns of the dead waited in perfect stillness behind him. Giants sagging on ropes of tendon, whites clad in rust-flecked mail. White spiders larger than Carthorses whose pale breath chilled the stones. The Night King lifted that same hand and pointed south. No horns, no drums. The horde began to walk. News of this march reached Winterfell on a wind that reeked of rot. Bran Stark sat beneath the weirwood scarlet canopy, pupils drowned in silver haze, skin turned brittle by hours in the bite of snow. His ravens scattered across half the north, seeing through 1,000 eyes. The last hearth fires extinguished by unholy frost, fields crusted under rime so thick even carrion crows froze upon fence posts. In the great hall, Sansa read his words to the gathered bannermen. They come in 2 tides, one west of the King's Road aiming toward the Barrowlands, the other skirting east past Queenscrown. She swallowed, voice wobbling but unbroken. We must stand, or the path to the Vale lies open. Lyanna Mormont banged a small mailed fist on the table. Bear Island stands. The girl's shout rang louder than any horn. We'll hold the Barrowlands if we choke them on the Karstark Bridge with steel and fire. And if fire fails? Asked Lord Serwyn, face pale. The old songs say no metal but dragon-forged will bite the others. Sansa's fingers tightened on the parchment. Dragonstone forges even now. 10,000 arrowheads already at White Harbor, 3,000 more by Moonturn. Maester Walken swears the glyphs are sound. A murmur rippled through the hall, equal parts awe and fear. Lady Barbary Dustin, stern as frost, lifted a brow. Glyphs? Sorcery fits ill with Ned Stark's shade. Sansa raised her chin. So does defeat. Far south, in the Red Keep's painted solar, Cersei Lannister lounged on a cushioned divan wearing a gown of black velvet sewn with 1,000 silver thorns. Behind her, Ser Gregor stood silent as ossified death. Before her knelt Harry Strickland, captain of the Golden Company. His plumed helm tucked beneath one arm. Your Grace, he said, dare not raising his gaze beyond her knees. Our vanguard holds the Blackwater ford. The unsullied patrols skirt the claw and retreat each time we feint. Their scouts burn hamlets, yet take no prisoners. Cersei took a slow sip of Myrish red. Let the dragon whore spread her forces thin. Every mile she marches north is a mile she cannot turn back. She set down the goblet, crimson pooling like spilled sun. You will dig pits across the King's Road, deep enough to break a horse's leg. Pave them with dragon glass shards. If her Dothraki horde charges, they'll stagger into a butcher's warren. T. Strickland hesitated. Dragon glass, your grace? We've salvaged little since the Targaryen girls stripped Dragonstone. Cersei's gaze flicked to Qyburn lurking behind the tapestry. The maester in name only swept forward. We have a supply, Captain. Scavenged from old Targaryen hordes last summer. My little birds work tirelessly. Strickland bowed again, wary. Then the Golden Company obeys. Cersei's smile never reached her eyes. She listened while he listed logistics. Levies pressed into trench duty. Storerooms of arbor grain rationed for winter. And she dismissed him with a wave. When the door shut, she rose, skirts rustling like dead leaves. They fear this winter specter, she said softly. Yet the North has never known Lannister iron. She brushed her fingertips across the map table, where hundreds of carved horse and wolf and lion sigils crowded like children's playthings. Let Stark bleed in ice. We claim the ashes afterward. Dean. That same evening, Davos Seaworth supervised the loading of the first river barge at Driftmark's docks. Gull cries cut the air. Freezing rain needled skin. A pair of oxen lowed nervously as lumbermen secured crates of star-glass dust beneath tarps. The hull smelled of fresh pitch and salt. Above, the massive dawn-pink sails bore the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. But Davis' eye lingered on a smaller banner fluttering at the prow. A snarling white direwolf on field of charcoal, edged with flame. Jon's new sigil merged Stark and Targaryen in equal halves. Unruly, unsettled, yet somehow right. Gendry Waters emerged from below decks, sleeves rolled high, arms smeared in black grease. Bellows rigged stout, he declared, wiping his brow. 24 firepots braced to the keel. 4 quenching troughs lashed top deck. But if your dragons decide to piss a hotter flame, I'll need thicker iron bands. Davos grinned, clapping the smith's brawny shoulder. You'll have them. Queen's orders. Queen's. Gendry scoffed, adjusting a hammer at his belt. It's Arya Stark who told me no sword leaves this deck unless it sings. Said she'd test them herself. Davos sobered. The girl's gone to the neck with a handful of shadow cats. No safer blades in Westeros, lad. Gendry's callous thumb touched the pommel of a short spear. Safe won't matter. Just sure. Elsewhere, in dim-lit passageways beneath the forge, Daenerys stood beside Razdar before a basin of quicksilver that rippled, though no wind touched it. The Red Priest's voice rasped like stone on iron. 2 forces bind Valyrian steel, fire to give shape, blood to give name. But there is a third, intention, unspoken, carried beneath the heart. Without it, the steel forgets its master and hungers to return to chaos. Daenerys regarded her own reflection flickering across the silver, face haloed by forge light. And if the master wavers? The steel wavers, Razdar said. Your dragons feed on certainty. Grant them doubt, they choke. Then Sal. She thought of the dream that had troubled every fitful sleep since forging Longclaw anew. A field of snow aglow with moonlight, pale shapes crawling over ruined ramparts. And Jon standing knee-deep in corpses, the river of their blood steaming into the night. She burned them with a single command. Yet when the smoke cleared, Jon lay half-buried among the dead. The wolf-hilt sword snapped in two. Doubt indeed. She closed her fist. Then we shall not waver. That conviction was tested sooner than any predicted. At dusk on the 12th day after Longclaw's rebirth, a column of refugees surged through the gates of White Harbor. Their stories rolled ahead on panic-frayed tongues. We saw men on pale horses breathing frost. We heard children cry and the sound carried no life. We smelled the sea freezing in the harbor. The sea, A gloom spread through the city faster than plague. Lord Manderley dispatched ravens south, then walked the battlements and promised every able body 3 meals a day if they bore hammer or shovel. Yet by sunrise ice floes crowded the bay, thick as winter's heart, though the calendar still swore it was autumn. Fisherfolk fled inland. Manderley sent a plea to Jon, "Come quickly, before the harbor locks freeze shut." Jon gathered a vanguard without waiting for the slow-foot soldiers. He rode north with Ghost loping scarlet-eyed at his stirrup, 50 mounted Dothraki at his heels, and 100 Stark spearmen stacked on wagons of coal. Above circled Rhaegal, green wings slicing cold air. The new sword, unnamed still, rested sheathed across Jon's back, light enough he scarcely felt its weight unless his thoughts leaned into its power. 3 days out from Winterfell, they met the first edge of unnatural cold. Trees lacquered in rime so thick bark burst, earth hidden beneath a crust that cracked like old clay tablets. Yet midday sun hung bright. The air should have melted such horror. Jon ordered torches lit even in daylight. The Dothraki muttered uneasily. The horses snorted, breath pluming silver. That night, campfires burned blue. Sparks drifted upward only to wink out mid-air, swallowed by a darkness that felt not absence of light, but presence of something worse. Ghost roamed restlessly beyond the perimeter. Every so often Jon heard him growl toward the forest, low and throaty, fur bristling. When he peered into the trees, he glimpsed nothing but frost-stiff branches. On the second night, around the hour, wolves began to sing. A sentry screamed. Jon tore from his tent, sword half drawn. Ghost bounded ahead, crimson eyes blazing. They found the sentry sprawled near a mangled sapling, throat rent. No foe in sight. Only a circle of frost burned into the earth. A perfect ring where grass lay dead and white. In its center lay a small carved figurine. A 3-headed dragon, wings folded, eyes of jet. Ghost snarled at it but would not cross the ring. Jon called Melisandre's name before remembering she had sailed far from these shores. He crouched instead, sliding the blades flat beneath the figurine. Steel hissed where it touched, frost boiling away. He threw the thing into the fire. The logs spat and shrieked. Blue flame leapt 10 feet before dying to ash. The camp did not sleep further that night. At dawn, an ice mist blanketed the valley. Shapes loomed within, hulking, lumbering. The gait of men half forgotten. Jon roused his riders. Torches thrust forward, they advanced at a trot down the deer track. The mist thinned, revealing a river frozen solid, horses stilled mid-gallop beneath a veneer of glass. Riders' bodies fused to saddles by frost. Stark outridders, perhaps 20. Their faces gray-white, eyes black pits. Jon had sent them ahead 3 nights prior. Before grief could bite, movement rippled through those vacant sockets. One rider's head jerked, brittle ice cracked. The corpse wrenched free of saddle leather like paper tearing. As one, the dead swung round, unsheathing swords rimed in ice. Their mounts, flesh fused to skeleton within gaunt hides, shuddered to terrible life. Archers, Jon shouted. Stark bowmen loosed flights of dragon glass-tipped arrows. Some found marks. Shards exploded within cold flesh, dropping corpses in showers of frost. Yet others rose despite shattered ribs, bones knitting with crystal filaments before the eye. The Dothraki surged, arcs blazing with torch oil, hacking limbs that crawled like mottled crabs once severed. Jon spurred forward, the new Valyrian blade leaping free in a flare of ghost blue. When its edge met the first wight's neck, the steel sang, a thin, keening note, and the corpse disintegrated in a plume of hoarfrost. Relief flashed through him like summer light. Blade true, but the mist thickened behind a line of dead, and from that wall glided a single figure astride a horse of exposed bone. The other wore no helm. Its bald skull was smooth as water-worn marble, eyes twin stars of frozen sapphire. In its gauntleted hands shimmered a spear of crystal that seemed to drink the sunrise. It raised the spear. Jon bellowed, reins jerking. Rhaegal shrieked overhead, wings cracking like thunder. Green flame gushed from the dragon's maw, sweeping the riverbank. Fire rolled over ice in a tide of emerald. catching whites mid-charge. Many fell, limbs curling inward like burned parchment. Yet the other's spear parted flame as water parts cloth, no soot marring the pale beam, no cinder touching its black armor. The spear shot forward, a bolt of cold so pure Jon felt teeth crack in his jaw. He twisted, lifted the sword. Steel met crystal. A sound like shattering bells ripped the air. Jon's arm numbed to the shoulder, but the spear deflected, thudding into earth where grass flash froze to razor shards. Rhaegal stooped. The dragon's jaws closed upon the other's steed. Bones shattered, scattering chips sparkling as gems. The other leapt with impossible grace, landing upon river ice that did not crack. It looked up at the dragon, unblinking, while frost spiderwebbed across Rhaegal's scales wherever the creature's gaze lingered. Jon charged, boots skidding across slush. The Valyrian blade streaked light. The other swayed aside, spear half spinning in a blur, parrying with ring of glass on metal. Shards flew where weapons kissed. Each breath the other took exhaled a halo of glittering snow. Ghost lunged at its back, jaws wide. A backhanded sweep of the crystal shaft caught the direwolf mid-air. Ghost crashed, stunned but alive. Jon pressed harder, forcing the duel across the river's frozen skin. Beneath his feet, water black, as the sky churned beneath thin ice. Above, Daenerys felt the forging call inside her bones snap taut. Drogon trumpeted and dove from cloud cover. Daenerys clinging to saddle spikes, cloak whipping. She saw Rhaegal's right wing mottled with frost, saw Jon dueling a nightmare upon brittle glass, saw Dothraki torches dwindling like stars behind curtains of advancing dead. "Dracarys!" she screamed. Drogon hurled a torrent of fire so white it swallowed color. The river hissed in apocalyptic steam. Ice exploded, fragments whirling skyward. The other vanished in the roil. Jon pitched sideways as the surface beneath him liquefied. He sank waist deep before Drogon's sweeping wing knocked aside falling timbers and laid a path of embers. Direwolf and rider lunged for it together. When the steam cleared, the other stood again on a fresh sheet of ice, as if summoned by the cold itself. Its spear reformed in its grasp, growing from thin air in shards that knitted seamlessly. It lifted its eyes to Daenerys. She met that gaze and felt a chill needling beneath her breastplate. Memories of the slave market in Meereen, where so many eyes had begged her for salvation she could not give. These eyes begged nothing. They promised oblivion. Drogon snarled, throat swelling. Yet the frost creeping along Rhaegal's right wing now spread across Drogon's underside, scales whitening. The great dragon shuddered. Flames sputtered. Daenerys' mind flashed to Razdar's words. Intention shapes steel. What of scales? What of hearts? Could doubt freeze even dragons? She slid from the saddle before terror could anchor limbs. Snow crunched under boots as she strode forward, cloak billowing like a living banner of black and scarlet. The other regarded her. Around them the battlefield fell to hush, both living and dead pausing as though the world itself stilled to listen. Daenerys thrust her left palm outward. Her blood, still bandaged from forging Longclaw, pulsed under linen. She spoke a single Valyrian word meaning neither hail nor greeting, but imperative. Yield. Silence stretched. Then the other tilted its head a fraction. The spear lowered, barely, and ice-crackle laughter that contained no joy whispered across the river. Jon moved then, springing behind the creature, blade high. The other spun, crystal shaft cutting an arc aimed for Jon's heart. Steel met glass once more. Sparks of frost exploded in a ring. Jon staggered but did not fall. He shouted something Daenerys could not hear through the blood roaring in her ears. She glimpsed his face behind the pale flare. Jaw set, eyes incandescent with purpose. She answered with motion of her own. From a sheath at her hip, she drew a dagger no longer than her hand, forged the night after Longclaw, its blade rippling with violet shadows. She hurled it. Months riding with Dothraki had honed her throw. Wind and fate guided. The dagger flashed past Jon's shoulder and buried itself in the other's right eye. For an immortal heartbeat, nothing happened. The Uther's hand touched the dagger's hilt, as though curious what nettle-pricked marble. Then cracks raced outward from the wound, fine as hair then widening. Its form fractured like glass struck by hammer. The creature erupted into shards of hoarfrost that whirled upward in a shrieking funnel. The spear disintegrated last, raining tinkling slivers. A hush swept the valley. Every wight within sight froze mid-lunge step, head cocked as if listening, then collapsed in heaps of inert flesh. Even the ice mist around them shredded, dissolving. Jon bent double, sucking air through clenched teeth. His sword's edge smoked with chill. Ghost padded to his side, flank matted in frost, eyes glittering. Daenerys approached. Her knees threatened to buckle, but she mastered them. Where the other had stood lay only a shallow crater of swirling snow, twin fragments of crystal no larger than teeth at its center. She knelt and lifted them. They were not cold, not warm, merely absence. Jon sank to one knee beside her. "You should have stayed back," he rasped. She laughed, sharp and bright, disbelief and relief entwining. "And let you dance alone with shadows?" He reached for her face with a trembling glove, thumb brushing soot from her cheek. "Your dagger, Valyrian? Forged from the first pour after Longclaw," she murmured. Asdar said steel must know its master. It knew mine. Drogon roared overhead, casting off frost in sluicing sheets. Rhaegal shook out wings now free of rime. For the first time in hours, the air did not bite quite so viciously. Snowflakes drifted gently, normal as winter should be. The company buried the dead quickly, piling bodies and broken gear into pyres, ringed by dragonglass stakes. Dawns were short this far north now. Each hour lost to grief was an hour winter claimed. Jon's face hardened as he ordered the fallen Stark outriders burned. No cairn, no carving, only flame. Daenerys touched his arm. He allowed it a moment, then turned back to the work. Ravens winged through the pale sky by hundreds, black stars against white. Bran's eyes rode with them. Within hours, missives reached Dragonstone, White Harbor, Winterfell, and even the Eyrie. Another slain by dragon-forged blade. Whites unraveled in its wake. Proof. Odd. In the great hall of Winterfell, Sansa read the Raven aloud. Silence followed, then a cheer so fierce it rattled banners. Yet Bran's voice, flat, distant, cut through. "One commander has fallen, not the king. The song is not ended." His gaze drifted to the dying hearth. Every log popped, spitting sparks in hissing protest. "Prepare the words that wake stone giants," he whispered. And only Arya heard, standing unseen in the rafters. Back at Dragonstone, Tyrion spread the report before Rasdar and Missandei beneath the stuttering light of rush torches. He tapped the passage describing the dagger. "Tell me this. If one queen's blood could shatter another, how many blades must we temper with her blood to turn the tide?" Missandei's hand shot out, covering the page. "How many drops before none remain?" she asked quietly. Rasdar's eyes burned in the half-dark, coal-bright. Valyrian lore speaks of forging kings into swords, but such tales end in madness and ruin. Tyrion poured himself wine, lips twisting. "Madness and ruin may greet us regardless. Let us at least bring a sword." That night, Daenerys climbed the tower stairs alone, stars brittle overhead. She found Jon upon the rampart gazing north, cloak snapping like a wounded banner. Without speaking, she pressed the 2 shards of crystal into his palm. They pulsed faintly, as though echoing his heartbeat. He closed his fist over them. "A lesson," she said. "Even ice shatters." "Ice, yes," he answered, not looking away from the horizon, "but winter remains." She leaned into him. Together they stood beneath cold stars, dragons coiling restless shadows against moon-washed clouds. The forged fires of Dragonstone burned still, preparing steel for 10,000 blades. Yet here, on this quiet sea-kissed wall, another forge worked. The furnace of resolve stoked by blood and belief. She felt its heat in their joined hands, in the thrum beneath her skin where doubt once lurked. Tomorrow the barges would sail, laden with glyph-etched spearheads. Tomorrow the Golden Company would wake to find half their trench diggers vanished, spirited away by Unsullied to wade through marshes around Moat Cailin. Tomorrow, Arya Stark would slip into Old Town disguised as a novice, tasked to retrieve a scroll locked in the Citadel's black vaults, said to name the Night King's first death. But tonight belonged to breath and courage borrowed from stars. Joan's thumb brushed the inside of her wrist. Tiny sparks of warmth danced up her arm. "Will you forge more daggers of your own blood?" "If blood is the price," he said, "it is mine to pay." His jaw set. "Not alone." She smiled then. Not the queen's smile nor the conqueror's, but that of a girl who once sold stolen fruits in dusty streets and dreamed of splashing in fountains. She turned his hand palm up, placed her own beside it, and with her other drew a slender blade. Together, they scored twin lines across skin, crimson welling bright dotawall. Their mingled drops spattered onto the rampart stone, hissing faintly where they fell. "Intention," she whispered. He echoed, "Intention." The wind caught their words and bore them out across moonlit sea until even the waves seemed to speak them, rolling them shore to shore. A vow, carried on salt and spray. In the heart of Dragonstone, the forge fires shifted, flaring higher as if stoked by unseen bellows. Sparks swarmed the night like newborn stars. And somewhere beyond the wall, in a palace of sculpted silence lit by aurora, the Night King paused. A shard of ancient ice he held between fingers melted. A single drop, sliding down a palm that had not known warmth in 1,000 years. He lifted it to his eyes, watching as it fell, not freezing mid-air, but shattering upon the black ice floor, laughing with a sound very like steel singing. He turned his gaze south, and all the dead around him exhaled in unison, a sigh of graves yawning open. Daenerys and Jon did not hear that sigh, but they felt, faint and far, a ripple of cold pass between stars. It touched their wounds. Blood steamed, sealing skin. Their hands tightened. They breathed as one. The night breathed with them. A lung of endless dark and fragile hope, drawing inward for the clash yet to come. Hey. Sea salt mist clung to Dragonstone's battlements when dawn bled pallid amber across the bay, the light thin as a sick child's smile. Daenerys rose from less than an hour of sleep, shrugged on a boiled leather jerkin, and descended through spiral stairs into the belly of the keep, where the heart-forge throbbed in volcanic cadence. Sparks leapt from the stacks like newborn fireflies, tracing brief parabolas before winking into soot. The island smelt of sulfur and sea-wrack, a mingling that had become the scent of her purpose. She found Resdar kneeling in a circle of chalk beneath the basalt dais, palms open, heat shimmering above his shaven skull. Around him, apprentices drew glyphs in quicksilver upon dagger blanks arrayed on an iron grid. Each blade glimmered lilac under forge glow, awaiting flame. With quiet, wordless nods, the smiths parted to let their queen step between them. Razor's lids lifted, revealing eyes gone silver white as molten lead. "Blood and breath," he rasped. Daenerys removed the kid leather glove from her left hand, exposing a faint scar across her palm barely a day healed. She set the hand to her lips, teeth worrying the seam until it oozed crimson anew. The forge's growl deepened as though it smelled her offering. She allowed drops to patter onto the center dagger. Each bead erupted in sparks that skittered down the blade's groove. Across the grid, etched glyphs flared, racing from dagger to dagger like vein fire chasing a heartbeat. Rasdar exhaled and the entire dais vibrated. Crucibles arced on pendulous chains overhead, tilting to pour silvered iron and stardust into the channels. Drogon, hunched beyond the arch like a mountain come alive, loosed a gust of red-black flame that funneled along runnels cut in the rock. Heat rolled over Daenerys in layers, yet her skin did not blister, only tingled as if every pore breathed deeper. When the roar quieted, 18 newborn blades lay cooling upon the grid, their edges already darkening toward obsidian purple. Hamel runes pulsed along each fuller, faint but steady. They were miniature echoes of the dagger she had thrown into the other's eye. Her talons, she thought forged from her marrow, to be flung by loyal hands into the white void. She felt lighter for every ounce of blood left in the steel, lighter and yet more firmly anchored, as though the forge accepted her fear and tempered it into resolve. She signed for the smiths to proceed. Apprentices lifted the bars with long tongs, lowering them into quenched troughs where seawater hissed to vapor. The scent of brine and iron mingled the way sun mingles with morning. Daenerys wiped her palm on a cloth and turned away. Her council awaited above, but first she saw Drogon. The great dragon crouched outside the vault arch, head bent low to fit the corridor. Scales still steamed. She placed a hand between the ridges of his snout, feeling warmth like a forge within forge. "You felt me hesitate," she whispered in Valyrian. Drogon's pupils narrowed to obsidian slits. He huffed warm air that ruffled her hair. She pressed her brow to his. "Never again." The beast did not answer with words, but a tremor rippled along the spines of his neck, and she sensed assent as keenly as if he'd spoken. On the mainland, Arya Stark rode a borrowed palfrey south through wintry drizzle, a drab septus cloak masking the sinew and coiled readiness beneath. Gendry's parting gift, a blacksmith's awl ground to a stillet nestled in her boot, needle-weighted in a hollowed book strapped to the saddle. Her objective lay ahead, the Citadel, seat of knowledge and too often, of hoarded secrets weighed against fear. She traveled alone, save for a single gaunt Tyroshi merchant who believed her a healer bound for a rural sceptre. Coin and a promise of silent tongues bought his escort. At dusk, the Hightower's pale beacon pierced the low clouds like a spear of glass. Arya abandoned her guide at an inn where candles smoked with stale tallow, then wended through Old Town's mazy, gull-screech alleys to a door of weathered oak. Inside waited the ragman, a fence from Bravos who owed the faceless men a debt cut across his cheek. He listened as she named a single title from the restricted black vault. The Annals of the Last Long Night, Volume 3. His lips turned clay-pale. "Locked," he whispered. "Behind 7 wards. Only an Archmaester of the 7 Keys enters alone." "Then he will not be alone," Arya replied. 2 nights later, cloaked by moonless dark, she slipped into the Citadel's eastern colonnade behind a procession bearing lavender candles. Pious novices recited evening canticles, their voices draped the marble with gauze soft echoes that masked her steps. She shadowed them to the central scriptorium where scroll carriers filed upstairs, then diverged, descending into a spiraling stair of chill stone. At the foot sat a door banded in Valyrian bronze, etched with sigils of the 12 warrior smiths who first forged the chain of office. Arya knelt. From a pouch, she drew a rolled sliver of purple-veined steel, one of Daenerys' fresh daggers. Its edge wrapped in oiled linen, the steel pulsed lightly, as if aware it approached forbidden knowledge. She slipped 2 thin picks, also Valyrian, into the ward slot below the sigil of Jasmariah MacQuarria, and breathed out until her pulse slowed. The lock spoke in clicks of protest, then surrendered. She eased the door inward. Dust spiraled in hush. Shelves 3 men high cramped the vaulted room, each cubby stuffed with moldy calfskin tomes long stripped of gilding. At center stood a plinth of weirwood. Upon it rested a single book cradled by iron loops. The cover, pale leather stretched taut across warped boards, bore faint runes drowned beneath the patina of ages. Its spine lacked a title rune. Only a smear of dried blood stained one corner, long gone black. Arya crossed. She unspooled a coil of fine gossamer wire from her belt and looped it around the nearest hinge pin, sawing gently until iron gave. An acrid tang filled the air. She ignored it. The final pin fell, and the clamp sprang apart. She lifted the book. Though small, it weighed more than a suit of mail, as though gravity thickened around it. Outside, bells tolled vespers. She closed the door, reset the lock, and ascended into starlight, a whisper, after the last novice extinguished his candle. Not until she reached the Footed Wharf district did she permit herself a breath that did not taste of hunted prey. She opened the book, only once that night, by guttering lantern aboard a skiff, piloted upriver, by smugglers sworn to house Tarly coin. Illuminated script swam before her, glyphs wrought in inks that gleamed like mother of pearl, shifting colors beneath lamplight. She could read none, but a parchment insert written in plainer hand slid free. On it, Bran Stark's ciphered scrawl: "Seek the name that was broken, but never undone." Beneath, an arcane diagram. A circle quartered by crossed lines, a ring of glyphs around a single rune that looked unsettlingly like an eye. Arya folded the insert, slid it inside her jerkin, and did not open the volume again. Some knowledge, she sensed, wanted to be earned only in blood. In the neck, dawn rose sickly green above hummocks of half-frozen fen, where reeds bowed under a crust of glassy ice. Moat Cailin emerged from the mists like the bones of some gutted colossus. 3 towers listing in the waiting swamp, their granite faces wasted by wind and siegecraft older than kingdoms. Beneath shattered archways, detachments of Mormont spearmen, Karstark bowmen, and Barrowlander shield wall veterans drilled under the barking command of Lyanna Mormont, whose voice cracked now and again but never faltered. Beside her rode Jorah, silver in his beard, eyes darker for pride and foreboding. "Hold your shield higher," the girl shouted at a raw-boned Karstark lad, barely taller than her own slight frame. "Dead things strike low. Living cowards strike high. Guard both." The boy adjusted, blush fighting rime on his cheeks. Supply barges poled along thin canals dredged by crannogmen. From their decks, laborers offloaded barrels of starglass arrowheads and the first crates of blood-etched daggers. Every crate bore 2 crests, direwolf over dragon. The men whispered and crossed themselves, but their hands reached for the weapons with hungry reverence. By midday, distant horns echoed over the mirror-flat water. The vanguard of the dead, advancing through the persimmon groves north of Greywater. Mist parted in streamers, revealing skeletal marsh giants wading chest-deep, tangled with drowned willows that clung like ragged cloaks. Behind them, wights in sodden surcoats slogged across half-frozen bog, eyes burning cerulean under matted helms. Soundless, relentless, Lyanna Mormont spurred forward, plate too large clattering against mail, and planted her standard in knee-high sludge, a black bear rampant upon green. "Barrowlanders to the north bank," she barked. "Karstark archers on the causeway." Iron shields anchor the gap by the broken gate. Her commands rippled outward in disciplined shouts, practice turning to purpose. Jorah rode to the girl's side. "Tower shields to the second rank," he murmured, adjusting his helm. He noted her trembling gauntlet. "Cold." She shook her head. "Anger." Trumpets sounded. The first volley of starglass arrows streaked skyward in arcs that caught what little sunlight filtered through fog. Shafts slashed down into the marsh giants. Where steel-tipped arrows might have bounced, obsidian punched clean, and the giants roared, in voices of avalanche, before collapsing into black brine that steamed on contact. The wights behind them trudged over the fallen without pause. As they neared the berm, Lyanna gave the next order. Dothraki pitfall engineers, sodden to the waist, heaved oil-soaked rush bundles into trenches scored the previous night. Jorah lifted a torch, hesitated, remembering too well the way flames sometimes failed against others, and hurled it. Fire whooshed up, orange fierce against green twilight. Yet where the flame touched the air itself iced, colors collided and hissed. Blue tongues erupted along the trench lip, devouring oil fire, turning it to glass that shattered under the first wight's foot. Jorah shouted retreat, but waterlogged earth stole speed. Wights poured over the cooled glass in a churning wave. Spears thrust, arrows thumped. Some fell, others kept coming, crawling over corpses and splintered shields with insect inevitability. A spear of crystal whirled from somewhere behind the pale host, severing 2 Karstark pikemen mid-torso. Their halves froze mid-air a heartbeat before crashing. Lyanna's small face set. She unslung the crimson-lacquered crossbow Tyrion had gifted her at Winterfell. It was heavy, gears whining softly, carved with both a bear and a lion. His joke. She cranked, loaded a starglass bolt, sighted not at the front rank, but toward the vague shimmer she suspected hid another. She exhaled. The bow thrummed. The mist convulsed. A shape jerked. The second rank of wights stumbled, momentarily mindless. In that blink, Jorah bellowed, "Advance!" Iron shields slammed together, pushing back. Infused daggers flashed, glittering violet as they stabbed joints. Eye sockets, throats rotted to lace. Each kill burst into hoarfrost that sizzled on shield rims but did not cling. An hour stretched. The battle seesawed across fen inches at a time until a low horn, distant yet immense, reverberated across the mire. The white stilled as one. Head snapped north. Then, impossibly, they withdrew, melting into fog inside 24 heartbeats. Screams dwindled. Silence sluiced through reed and water. The trench smoked, but no flame burned. Jorah removed helm, chest heaving, and turned slowly in the sudden hush. Corpses, human and otherwise, carpeted the marsh. He counted losses with a soldier's eye and marked that nearly a quarter of their fighters yet stood. Miraculous. Lyanna's cheeks remained colorless, but her mouth quirked something like satisfaction. "We bled the tide," she murmured. "For now," Jorah answered. Behind them, Cranagman scouts approached with blowpipes lowered. The eldest, mud-caked and gray, bowed. "Protector Reed sends word. An isle 3 leagues east grows colder by the minute. Says the Night King plants something there. An obelisk of ice with runes no living man can read." Lyanna glanced to Jorah. Obelisk? He recalled tales at his father's knee. Stories of razor-thin monoliths the children of the forest once used to focus magic. If the Night King corrupted such a thing, he could anchor endless winter within the neck. He voiced as much. Lyanna spat into the mud. "Then we break his anchor. Far to the east of the neck, in the damp echo of an undercroft, beneath Harrenhal's tallest hearth." Cersei Lannister tilted a goblet of arbor gold against her lips and studied the chained shape hunched across the fire pit. The prisoner's skin was the color of evening storms, scarred in raised lattice burns. Its eyes, half-lidded, reflected flame yet showed no fear. A white taken at great cost by Keyburn's hunters in the foothills of the Frostfangs, surviving on slivers of black sorcery, bound within a lead-inked scrawl tattooed along its spine. She circled it, trailing a finger along the goblet rim. "You see, Gregor?" She purred to the mountain looming over her. "Our northern kin believe fire their only salvation, but fire can be bought. If I burn a forest in the north, half their dragons must fly to answer. While they're spent smothering, we win the war they forget." Her smile flashed thin. "And if winter marches southward, unopposed, well, a kingdom of corpses bothers me less than a northern queen sat upon my throne." Qyburn shuffled forward, clasping parchments. "With your permission, your grace, we can guide the army of the dead." The sigils carved upon the obelisk in the neck correspond to ley lines charted in the annals of the last long night. "If my servants enlarge those runes on 7 hills ringing the capital," Cersei waved a lazy hand. "Do it." She watched the white breathe, a rattling hiss like bellows through cracked wood. "Begin in the Whispering Wood. I want Winterfell screaming into broken walls before the bitch Daenerys can so much as blink." Mementoons. At sea aboard the flagship Windsong, formerly a Taroshi spice galley, Jon Snow stood upon quarterdeck planks slick with sleet. The rigging groaned overhead. Canvas strained under unnatural crosswinds that pushed upon the sails like ghosts. They sailed north along the bight, the sea a slab of pewter bruised with drift ice. At the prow Ghost perched, muzzle raised, tasting wind for scents impossible at sea. Jon turned the crystal shards Daenerys had given him over in his palm. By lamplight below decks he'd studied them, facets smooth as oiled glass, yet under certain angles he glimpsed swirling motes within, sparks of winter imprisoned. He kept them in a pouch next to the new Valyrian blade. Together they felt like puzzle pieces carved from night and dawn. Ser Davos approached, cloak whipped about his knees. "Raven from Moat Cailin," he said, handing over a half-damp scroll. Jon read by moonslant. Lyanna's terse hand, reporting the battle and retreat, mention of the obelisk on the isle. He closed eyes. "He plants anchors," Jon murmured. Memories stirred. Stories old Nan whispered of the black winter, and the carved black stone the others raised at Nightfall Ridge, until the Stark of Winter shattered it with a hammer of dragonsteel. Legends twisting into present. Davos raked a hand through gray hair. "We're half a day from White Harbor. Dock, unload, march the forges up the King's Road, or sail west along the marsh channels and strike that isle first? Jon looked north where stars pulsed faint through a Tyrian cloud. We break the anchor, he said, voice soft yet unarguable. Dawn means nothing if anchors drag it under. Davos pursed lips, nodded. Then I'll put the ships into the Greenwood's mouth by sunrise. Shallow draft will serve. Jon lingered, gaze following a glitter of aurora flickering over the horizon. The skies wound where winter bled color. He curled icy fingers around the shards until they pricked skin. Warmth seeped despite the cold. On Dragonstone, the council chamber rang with voices. Tyrion paced a figure eight around the painted table, a chalk nub flicking across continents as though erasing mountains. Grey Worm stood statue still, arms folded, yet his eyes followed every move. Missandei held a wax-sealed cylinder of Raven reports. Daenerys had just returned from the forge, still dusted in metallic ash. Jon sails for the obelisk, she announced without preamble, reading the fresh missive. He orders the second flight of forges redirected up the Blackwater to the Trident, not Winterfell. Tyrion's pacing stopped. Dragonstone's heart forge cannot move. Without your breath on the neck front. My breath goes where Jon goes, she answered simply. Silence gathered. Grey Worm inclined his head. Then my unsullied hold Dragonstone until your return. The Golden Company masses near Harrenhal. They will strike the capital once we commit northward. Tyrion set chalk down with force. Every step we take is shadowed by Cersei's knives, and now she consorts with necromancers. Qyburn's hunters captured a live white weeks ago. He fixed Daenerys with heavy eyes. I fear she means to shape winter as a dagger to hold at all throats, even the Night King's. Daenerys touched the fresh scab on her palm. Let her try. Steel remembers its master, but so does fire. She looked to Grey Worm. Ready half the Unsullied to embark with me by dusk. The other half remain under your command to defend this isle. 2 dragons fly north, 1 stays to watch you. Tyrion opened his mouth, closed it, then inclined his head. I pray we are not carving the world too thin, your grace. We are reforging it, Daenerys answered. And reforging always thins the blade before it is folded stronger. She strode from the hall without cloak. The wind howled through arrow loops. Tyrion's chalk rolled across the map and fell to the floor, shattering. Night scudded over the neck, while moorcocks shrieked warnings only hunters heard. Jon's landing party disembarked in silence onto a mudflat that squelched beneath each cautious step. David. Spectral moss gleamed blue-white on trunks under the aurora's lambent wash. The obelisk reared in a clearing ahead, taller than any tower in White Harbor, razor facets drinking starlight. Runnels of pale fire crawled its surface in runes that writhed like trapped eels. Rhaegal and Drogon wheeled overhead in watch circles. Winds buffeted ice dust from the obelisk's crown. As Jon advanced, shards in his pouch vibrated, a keening like thin crystal rubbed by wet finger. The fresh-fanged daggers at his back rang in chorus. Beside him Arya materialized from cedar shadow, cloaked in muddied linen. She must have raced for days to intercept. Ghost patted a circuit, hackles raised. Bran's diagram, she murmured, producing the folded parchment. See the ring of glyphs? The one at the center matches these on the stone. Jon unfolded it, comparing whirl of lines with the sigils glowing before them. If we destroy that center, does the magic fail? Maybe, Arya said. Or it draws every other in the marsh to us. She thumbed Needle's hilt. Either way, I'm tired of skirting shadows. Davos called softly from rear lines. Mormont spears readied, 8 Dothraki with whip braids nodded. Gendry hefting a maul of fresh Valyrian mix. Jon signaled forward. They crossed a moat of still water iced in film. Frost's whisper under boots filled ears the way thunder sometimes fills lungs. 5 paces from the obelisk, the shards in Jon's pouch leapt as if alive, drawing perpendicular to its face. Runes surged brighter, air crackled. A pulse rang outward. Silent but felt, slamming hearts in ribs. Across the clearing, dead leaves burst skyward like fish fleeing fire. From every direction shapes shambled. Whites and bronze corroded beyond recognition. Skeletons of long-dead first men dredged from fen. Even 3 squat frog beasts half human in outline. perhaps crannogmen slain centuries ago. "Hold," Jon said, voice iron flat. The first rank met the onrush. Starglass arrowheads, shattered skulls. Wielders ducked beneath flailing claws. Arya wove a dance through gaps, her Valyrian stiletto piercing eye after eye, each corpse folding in crisp hush of frozen parchment. Gendry's maul hummed as it cleaved ribs to powder. Every corpse he felled burst to rhyme that coated his beard. Jon pressed toward the monolith. The giant stone shimmered, runes spiraling faster. At its foot, he saw a slot. Square, precisely the width of the shards. He drew them. The nearer he brought them, the hotter his gloves felt, though breath plumed white. Runes around the slot shifted pattern, aligning into the diagram Bran had sketched. Arya blocked a white that lunged for his flank. Her blade flicked, dropping it. "Do it!" Jon slammed the shards home. They clicked, locking into a single crystalline fang that sank flush into stone. Light erupted. He staggered back. The monolith hummed, then cracked. A fissure raced up its height, branching lightning, veining midnight. With a sound like glaciers calving, the obelisk exploded outward in petals of ice that vaporized midair. Sucked into a vacuum of silence so absolute his ears screamed against it. All movement stopped. Whites froze mid-lunge and collapsed. Frost sheathing Gendry's, mole sublimed to steam. The forest exhaled. An audible, grateful sigh, and the aurora overhead rippled brighter as though freed. Then the silence broke with a cry. No human throat could shape such anguish. It came from the north, far yet near. A bellow of loss and rage older than castles. The Night King had felt his anchor shatter. Jon knelt, chest heaving. The slot now held only blackened ice dust. Arya offered a blood-flecked hand. He clasped it. Around them men drew shaky breaths, blades drooping as muscles quivered. Drogon roared above, a triumph that shook pine needles loose in showers. Rhaegal answered, a bell of victory. Fire and ice both had sung, and for once flame did not falter. In Harrenhal's undercroft, the chained white writhed, limbs twisting. Frost spilled from its eyes. The runes tattooed down its spine smoldered, lines turning red then white-hot. With a wet pop its chest burst, spattering ichor across stone. Cersei leapt back, gown spattered. Qyburn darted forward with tongs, but the corpse blackened, shrank into shards of ash. The maester's lips drew thin. One anchor has been broken, he muttered. The control matrix destabilizes. Cersei's hand trembled once, wine splashing. She masked it with a snarl. Then carve runes on every hill from here to Storm's End. I will drown them in anchors. My queen, Qyburn cautioned. Each glyph draws winter's breath closer. Spread too many and we invite the storm into our own lungs. Better frost than dragonfire, she snapped. She whirled for the stairs, but Sir Gregor blocked the exit. Blue flame flickering in his visor slits. For half a heartbeat, Cersei thought him turning traitor. Then she realized the flame burned in every brazier behind him, unnatural, hungry. Qyburn's eyes widened. He changes tactics, he whispered. He will break what he cannot bend. Cersei stared at the blue fire dancing on iron tongues and felt, perhaps for the first time, a thin thread of fear that wine could not drown. She shoved past Gregor and fled upward. Bran Stark jerked awake beneath the weirwood's bloody leaves, ravens scattering. Frost dusted his eyelashes though no snow fell. He drew a rattling breath. The Night King has tasted pain, he murmured. Now he seeks new flesh to mend the wound they gave him. Sansa knelt, pulling a fur tighter around him. What does he hunt? Memory, Bran whispered, eyes clouding. He will come for the Isle of Faces. If he claims the Green Men's heart tree, he can rewrite the song. Her fingers tightened. Then we must hold it. Hold, Bran echoed, staring beyond her. Or cut down every root so he grasps only rot. His gaze sharpened. Send ravens. Every ship, every rider. The truest battle may not be Winterfell at all. Now, at Dragonstone, Daenerys mounted Rhaegal. She would leave Drogon to guard the Isle this once, a decision heavy but needed. Grey worms saluted at the quay, 2,000 unsullied shields gleaming. Above, the evening sky churned with a bruised purple front rolling from the north. Lightning forked gold through charcoal masses. Missandei handed Daenerys a sealed bundle of dispatches. Her eyes betrayed fear and pride in equal measures. Daenerys clasped her friend's hands. Without ceremony, she launched skyward. Rhaegal's wings tore air into thunder. Behind her rose 6 black-hulled dromons, bearing fresh daggers and spearheads. Flame-lit decks shimmered. As Dragonstone dwindled, she glimpsed Drogon perched upon the stone drum's summit, silhouette vast against storm. Their bond tugged, a thread of longing, but she set her face northward, feeling time coil tight. High above the marching flotilla, she unrolled Joan's latest raven. Penned before destroying the obelisk, "I have broken one chain. I suspect there are others. Steel and blood held. But the Night King is angered, and anger moves faster than reason. Meet me at Moat Cailin if you can. If not, strike for the Isle of Faces. Bran sees peril there. Whatever happens, remember the Forge's rule. Intention. Mine is you." The quill strokes grew jagged toward the end, as though the ship had lurched. Yet one final line stood sure. "We will bend impossible things again." Wind tore the parchment from her fingers. It spiraled into storm. She watched it vanish, strangely calm. The memory was enough. She leaned low over Rhaegal's neck. Lightning flashed ahead, painting towers of cloud in iron-white glare. She spoke one word to the storm, the same command she once gave Chains and Astapor. And her voice did not quaver. "Yield." And the dragon flew on, green wings beating against a sky crowded with thunder, toward a future being hammered moment by moment into a blade at once fragile and unbreakable. A strand of dawn light intended for darkness's heart. Rain slanted across the marsh plain like a curtain of needles, each droplet brittle with half-frozen sleet that rattled on helm and mail. Jon Snow stood knee-deep in peat at the breached northern berm of Moat Cailin. Mud sucking greedily at his boots, wind clawing at the sable-lined cloak Arya had thrust over his shoulders 3 hours earlier. He had not felt warm since the obelisk shattered, but the chill inside him owed less to weather than to portent. Somewhere beyond the rack of storm and reed, the Night King keened for his broken anchor, and every gust seemed to carry a shard of that sound. Thin, cold, almost musical. Across the ragged causeway, the dead massed again, gathering beneath skeins of mist like carrion beneath a black wing's shadow. In torchlight, Jon glimpsed the outline of pale war machines cobbled from frozen saplings and sinew, skeletal catapults creaking to life as wights strained at rope winches of gut. The enemy meant to fling not boulders but corpses, freshly scythed wildlings and Karstark deserters, weighted with stones, each a seed of plague meant to burst upon the battlements and rise to turn friend upon friend. Clever, he thought grimly. Learning. A drumbeat of hammers sounded behind, louder than the thunder. Gendry's makeshift forge lashed to the ruins of the Children's Tower, belched sparks while rivers of rainwater hissed upon fresh-poured steel. Daenerys' blood-borne daggers cooled in troughs as black as nightshade. When the smiths lifted them, glyphs shimmered violet beneath runnels of water, hungry for work. A war of attrition in steel and ice, Gendry had muttered, shaking exhaustion from his arms. We must outforge their death. Jon's gaze tracked the line of archers along the battlement. Karstark survivors in sodden mail, Mormont women with braids plastered to scalps, Barrow knights grim beneath dented sallets. All bore obsidian-tipped arrows or star-glass quarrels. Enough. He doubted it, but hope was seldom a matter of numbers, and steel had held once already. Rain sheeted harder, turning torch flames to sullen smoke. A horn bellowed 3 notes to the south. Jon stiffened. Through the deluge he saw lanterns bobbing above flooded reed beds, shapes of flat-bottomed skiffs poling up the narrow channels. Banner pennons snapped darkly. A white bear on green, a gray direwolf, a scarlet 3-headed dragon. Relief gusted warm through his ribs. Lyanna Mormont slogged first onto the berm. a spear taller than she strapped across her back, eyes alight like embers plucked from the forge. Behind her waited Jorah, breastplate dented and smeared with wet clay, but his shoulders were square beneath the weight of a soaked bear cloak. Crannog men, in reed-woven cuirasses, paddled their boats ashore. Among them, slender men carried bundles of frog spears and jugs of pale resin. Jon strode forward through mud that grasped like hands. "You broke through." Lyanna gave a curt nod, wiping sleet from her lashes. "We shattered their flank at Greywater Watch, but only for a breath. They will regroup." She jabbed a thumb at the resin jars. "Bog sap mixed with quicklime. If your dragons fire it, the marsh will burn blue." "That buys hours?" Jorah set a gauntlet on Jon's arm. "Where's Daenerys?" Jon glanced skyward. Clouds stacked like anvils smothered starlight. "She flies," he answered, voice rough. "She will come." Thunder reverberated, a belly-low peal that rolled through bones. Across the causeway, the Night King's catapults creaked upright, skeletal arms pawing at clouds. Stiff shadows climbed onto the launch pans, corpses riddled with ice shards. Jon's goot clenched. "Archers to first rank." Lyanna unslung her spear. "Let them throw. We catch and kill." Her voice carried, an iron child becoming legend in the raw forging of terror. The catapults unleashed. Bodies hurtled, limbs splayed, trailing whips of frost. Arrows streaked up, few finding mark in the storm's chaos. Corpses smashed into muddy earth and shattered, too frozen to reanimate. Yet many slammed intact into parapets, tumbling onto men whose footing faltered in slime. Screams lifted like sparks. Jon vaulted a parapet, landing beside two Karstarks pinned under a thrashing corpse. With one stroke of the Valyrian blade he severed arm and head. The carcass crumbled to rimed shards. He hauled the soldiers to their feet. "Keep moving," he shouted, and turned to see Arya dancing half-visible through sleet, her small Valyrian stiletto flickering, severing spines and jaws with surgical grace. More bodies rose behind, eyes blazing blue despite the pelting rain. Jon's sword sang, edge meeting dead steel, sparks hissing into puddles. Around him the newly forged daggers did their grim work, whites evaporating in halos of frost. Yet, for every one that fell, 3 more crawled over the berm, jaws clacking like dice rolled by doom. A roar split the sky, different from thunder, deeper, resonant with volcanic hunger. Through a ragged rent in cloud plunged Rhaegal, emerald wings shearing wind. Upon his neck rode Daenerys, cloak plastered to her like a second hide, silver gold hair whipping free. She reined the dragon in a banking glide. Boiling fire rolled from Rhaegal's maw, scorching the second catapult before it launched. Timbers exploded, packed corpses ignited, raining incandescent shards that flashed and winked out in the mire. Cheers rose muddily, but a new sound answered, an alien, crystal shriek. From beyond the ranks of dead, strode 3 pale figures clad in mail that shimmered moonlight, even in rain. Lieutenants of the Night King. Each bore a polearm cunningly carved from translucent ice, tips barbed, shafts wrapped in filaments of frost that bled cold. They advanced together, no wight daring hinder their path. Daenerys banked Rhaegal for a second strike. Blue lightning forked from one lieutenant's spear, lancing skyward to meet the Dragonfire. The bolt and flame collided in midair, birthing an explosion of steam that hurled Rhaegal sideways. The dragon shrieked, pinwheeling, tail-sithing water as it fought equilibrium. Daenerys clung, face white in the flare. Jon sprinted, boots slapping spatter. Ghost bounded at his heel. The lieutenants converged on the central breach of the berm where Lyanna's shield wall braced. Spears of ice crashed down. One shattered an iron-bound shield into a mist of frost splinters and hurled the bearer like a broken doll. Another pierced mud and stone alike, freezing a plate-mailed Mormont to the ground where he stood, breath frosting to rime before his eyes glazed. Lyanna bellowed in furious grief, jammed her star-glass spear under the frozen warrior's pauldron, and snapped it upward. The wight's torso exploded to rime dust. She whirled on the lieutenant and spat a challenge lost to thunder. Jon reached her side. Arya slid in from the gloom opposite. Together the 3 Starks faced the pale trio. Jon felt the shards from the shattered obelisk hum inside his belt pouch, vibrating toward the lieutenants as though drawn by some grim magnetism. One lieutenant stepped forward, spear rising. Its lips moved. No sound came save the crack of ice. Blue mist wafted from its mouth. Jon lifted his blade. Glyphs flared bright blue-white where rain struck. "On me," he told his sisters and lunged. The ice spear met Valyrian steel with a chime like glass bells. Frost bit into his sword's fuller, crept an inch. Then blue-white flame licked the blade. The frost retreated, sizzling. Jon pivoted, drew the edge across the lieutenant's chest in a shallow arc. No blood, only a score of glittering cracks. The creature hissed, returning with a downward slam that would have split his skull if Arya had not blurred forward, her stiletto punching into the creature's thigh joint. It staggered. Lyanna darted beneath its reach. Star-glass spear jabbing upward into the gap at jaw and helm, burying deep. A shudder racked the other. Frost spider webbed outward from the wound, limbs fracturing. It collapsed into a heap of hail. The twin lieutenants screamed, a sound that rattled stones. One swept its spear in a horizontal arc, loosing shards that sheared through shields and flesh. Jon ducked, but a Marbrand squire lost an arm in a blossom of ice before he sank screaming into mud. Arya leapt, using the falling body as a step, vaulting up and over the spear's arc chord. Mid-air she switched the dagger to her other hand, stabbed downward into the lieutenant's eye. The blade sank to the haft. The creature burst in a geyser of hoarfrost around her. She landed, rolling, already turning to the last. That one backed away a pace, spear turning defensively. Rhaegal roared behind, fire billowing mere yards overhead, baking mud to ceramic. Steam wreathed the berm. Jon circled opposite Arya. The lieutenant's gaze flickered between them. Ice runes crawled across its helm. It jabbed. Jon parried. Arya darted, slicing hamstring. Jon thrust forward, shattering the breastplate. The other stumbled. Lyanna, spear now broken to jagged point, rammed the shard between its spine plates. It spasmed, crumpled, evaporated. Instantly the whites nearest stiffened, then sagged into inert meat. Across the causeway, a ripple of collapse raced outward, as though someone swept an invisible scythe. Half the dead host slumped into heaps. Those beyond remained, but confusion broke their cohesion. The Night King's lieutenants were his field captains. 3 gone would sting. Jon panted, noticing only then the blood trickling along his forearm from a shallow shard cut. Lyanna leaned on her broken spear, cheeks streaked with mud-red water. Arya wiped her dagger clean on a scrap torn from a corpse. Distant horns echoed. A series of rising minor thirds Bran had taught to warn of Greenside assault. Jon's head snapped eastward. In the low distance, beyond marsh and fog, a plume of iridescent light speared the clouds, pulsing sickly green. "The Isle of Faces," Arya breathed. Bran was right. Jon grabbed her arm. "You must go. So must you." He shook his head. "I remain here to hold the neck. You and Lyanna take a skiff. Quiet. Swift. Find the green men. Protect the heart tree." He turned to Jorah, who had arrived grim-faced, sword dripping. "Escort them to the boats." Jorah's jaw tightened. "One of us must guide the spearheads to burn the marsh. I know these channels less than you." Lyanna's glare could char oak. "I can guide boats blindfolded. You stay with the king." Jorah hesitated till Jon nodded. "Go. Speed is all." They sprinted, Arya and Lyanna vanishing into reeds like ghosts, Jorah close. Jon watched until fog swallowed them. Then he turned to the berm's ragged defenders. "Hold fast," he bellowed, voice rawed. "The others bleed today. They will bleed again. Draw strength from flame." He lifted the Valyrian blade high. Lightning flickered, catching edges until the sword burned like dawn above broken ruin. Rhaegal banked overhead, shrieking defiance. Jon felt Daenerys' eyes on him, though he could not see her through sleet. Their shared certainty pulsed along the bond forged in blood and breath, a living wire strung across storm and doubt. The first skiff sliced marsh water under muffled oar strokes. Arya at the prow, Lyanna braced amidships with a spear to fend submerged snags. Jorah manned the stern sweep, gaze flicking between reed wall and dark water. Frogs croaked eerily in the hush after battle. Now and then, a ripple cut the surface, as if the fen itself stirred. A faint glow ahead, phosphorescent, pulsing like a diseased heart, marked the sacred isle's perimeter. Willow branches arched overhead, draped in ghost moss. As they drifted beneath, the water smelled of sap and loam rather than brine. Warmth rose, clashing with cold wind. A low whistle sounded starboard. Jorah angled the torch, illuminating a bow drawn taut, arrow aimed at his chest. From behind the bow emerged a man the height of Lyanna but ancient in bearing. Skin mottled green-brown, hair woven with leaves so dry they rasped in wind. A green man of legend. Others appeared, a dozen at least, stepping from root and bulrush, each with antler helms of rowan or yew, each silent. Arya raised both hands, palms empty. "We guard the tree," she whispered. The first green man's eyes glinted yellow as candle fat. Slowly he lowered the bow. He spoke in a language like water over gravel, then clearer. "Guardian wolves bring steel of dawn. The heart roots weep." He turned, beckoning. One by one, the green men melted into the grove's gloom. Arya gestured for the others to follow. They stepped onto land soft with decades of leaf rot. Moss swallowed boot prints instantly. Within 100 paces, the great heart tree emerged. A weirwood colossal, bark milk white, face carved ages ago with mundane human hand. Yet tears of red sap trickled fresh from its eyes. Around its base rose rough stone monoliths, etched in spiraling symbols, glowing faintly, wards perhaps. But on 3 of the stones, the glow guttered, cracked. Dark fissures ran across glyphs, seeping freezing mist. Lyanna's breath plumed. "He is here already." The air thrummed. From between the trunks of a stand of black alder, a figure glided, tall, armored in black ice, strided white like dragonbone, helm crested with fractured antlers. Not the Night King, but something older, shoulders broader, crown fused to skull. Eyes blazed white rather than blue. A king before kings. Green men hissed, arrows knocked. The figure strode forward unhurried. Where its feet touched ground, frost spread, crackling across moss. Jorah stepped before the girls, gripping his longsword two-handed. "Back," he murmured. The ancient other raised an arm. Frost feathered across the monolith nearest, glyphs extinguishing. Roots groaned beneath earth. The weirwood's face contorted. Sap tears ran faster. Arya slid sideways, shadows licking her cloak. Lyanna skulked opposite flanking. They moved as 2 edges of a broken dagger. Jorah stepped, sword high. "You will go no further," he declared, voice steely despite shaking limbs. The Uther's helm inclined, almost curious. It extended its hand. A lance of ice shot forth, meant to impale. Jorah pivoted, blade cleaving. Steel kissed ice, sparks and frost erupting. The lance shattered, but the shock numbed his arms. Arya darted, her stiletto punching at a joint behind the knee. The tip met unseen force, sliding off. She rolled away as the other turned, bringing a hand down. Frost sprayed where her back had been. Lyanna hurled her spear. Star-glass point bit deep into the creature's chest. White light bled along the shaft. For a breath it remained lodged, then it melted, wood collapsing to rime that the other brushed aside. Jorah attacked anew, sword swirling. Every strike shaved chips of ice mail. But those wounds closed instantly. The other lifted Jorah by the throat, gauntlet smoking cold. His sword dropped, clanging off root. Breath crystallized in his beard as lungs struggled. Arya flew, leaping onto a root above, then down onto the other's shoulder, striking the dagger up under its helm. The blade bit, stuck. She twisted. The dagger snapped. Half remained in the wound. The other staggered, releasing Jorah, but swung a backhand that sent Arya skidding across moss 20 feet to crash into a stone. Lyanna flung herself over Jorah's fallen sword, raised it clumsily. It weighed near her own weight. She brought it down at the creature's leg. The edge skittered, but the blow diverted the Uther's step toward Arya. It turned on the girl, and for an instant their gazes locked. A child of bear blood, and a king of ice older than doom. It raked a claw hand toward her. A horn blasted. Wing beats thundered overhead. Rhaegal circled, green fire-licking fangs. And upon a second dragon, Drogon, rode Daenerys, features drawn by wind and blood, left palm bandaged anew. She saw the scene in a heartbeat. Arya dazed, Lyanna braced over Jorah, the heart tree bleeding. And she did not hesitate. Drogon folded wings, plummeted, flame blooming like a sunburst. But as fire cascaded, the other hurled a hand skyward. Flame met a shield of night-black ice. The torrent split, curving around the grove without touching root or leaf, searing only empty air. Daenerys screamed wordlessly, a sound of fury and betrayal of physics. Drogon lifted, banking. Rhaegal roared, adding his blaze. Again the black shield deflected, though cracks spidered across it. Jorah staggered to feet, gasping. Arya pulled herself upright, blood on her temple. She pressed her broken blade's remnant. Still lodged in the other's collar, deeper. Frost flared around the wound. The cracks in the creature's shield widened. Lyanna dragged the Starglass spear's broken tip from muck, leapt, slamming it into the fissure. Cracks blossomed across the other's armor. Daenerys, high above, felt the forge's cold pulse in her bandaged palm. She grasped a dagger sheathed at her belt, its glyphs humming her heartbeat. She threw it. The blade tumbled end over end, a comet of violet fire. It struck the crown of the ancient other, point burying to the hilt. Light erupted. A shockwave hurled everyone flat. Drogon buffeted sky sideways. The other convulsed. White flame poured from its eyes and mouth, licking into the cracks. Armor shattered outward, pieces dissolving mid-air. For an instant a human skull beneath remained, etched with runes, dangling by strings of frost. Then it too burst into dust that glittered down like sleet. The monolith's fissures knitted shut, glow intensifying to warm gold. The weirwood's tears slowed. Silence fell, broken only by the panting of the living and the soft groan of ancient branches. Lyanna, trembling, stared at her empty hands. Arya picked herself up, wiping blood from one brow, eyes wide with wonder and terror. Jorah fell to one knee, coughing steam. Rhaegal and Drogon hovered overhead, beating rain to spray. Daenerys guided Drogon to ground, leapt down onto root-woven earth, stumbled to Lyanna, and knelt. She took the girl's small, cold hands in hers. "You did not waver," she whispered. Lyanna's lips parted. "We folded," she rasped, remembering the forge's adage. Daenerys smiled through tears lost in rain, and sang truer. Green men crept forward, bows lowered. Their leader knelt to scoop the black dust of the other into a bark canister, sealing it with woven grass. He placed it at Daenerys' feet. "Seed of night," he said in halting common. "Keep. Bury in flame when dawn breaks." Arya approached Jorah, helping him stand. They exchanged quiet nod, forged of battles shared, and debts paid thrice. The heart tree's carved face watched, red sap glistening. In its eyes no fearful knowledge flickered now, only weary relief etched by a hand who had foreseen days like this. Daenerys laid a palm on the bark of that living testament. The chill inside her eased, replaced by a warmth older than Dragonfire, as if roots whispered gratitude. She closed her eyes, feeling for Jon across whatever distance remained. Found him, a steady flame behind a veil of storm. Safe for now. At Moat Cailin, dawn seeped watery pink through tattered clouds. The Night King's host stood silent across the causeway, ranks halved after the collapse of lieutenants, but still monstrous in scale. No catapults fired. No charge came. The dead awaited a signal that had not sounded, their empty faces brave in unfeeling patience. Jon's snow-dusted hair glinted under first sun. Around him men sagged against remnants of wall, exhaustion drawing lines deeper than mud. Gendry slumped by the forge anvil. Soot and joy mingled on his face, Ghosts patrolled with slow grace, crimson eyes fixed on frozen silhouettes beyond the blind-eyed. A hush spread as figures broke mist from the south. Daenerys riding at Drogon's neck, Regal banking alongside. Behind, skiffs pulled through channels bearing Arya, Lyanna, Jorah, and silent green men. Jon's heart stuttered in gratitude too vast for speech. Drogon landed within the berm, scattering embers from torches. Mud hissed beneath his talons. Daenerys slid down, met Jon halfway. They seized each other's forearms, foreheads touching, relief and resolve in one breath. "A seed of night," she murmured, showing the sealed bark tube. Jon's eyes hardened. "We bury it in flame at Winterfell's hearth," he said. "Then we finish this." Thunder muttered far north, distant, angry. The Night King's figure materialized atop a ridge, alone, cloak of storm billowing. He studied the burning forges, the lines of embattled humans, the dragons coiled behind. Slowly he raised a hand. Snow swirled, shapeless, then resolved into shapes. Spire-tall spears of ice erupting from the ground across the field. Each spear bled streams of fog that spiraled skyward, weaving into cloud. Jon paled. He means to call the storm in truth. Daenerys gripped his wrist where pulse beat strong. "Then we meet him before it breaks." Her gaze swept their weary ranks. "We march." Jorah coughed into a fist, stepped forward. "To Winterfell?" "No," Jon answered, staring at the ridge. "We strike him on open field, beneath his storm, far from walls crowded with innocents." He turned, voice lifting to carry. "We march for the shivering shore. There dragons fly free, and dead things have nowhere to hide." A murmur, then a rising shout. Blades lifted, dented but keen. Men and women who had thought dawn unreachable found fire yet unspent in sinew. Gendry hammered one last nail into a crate of finished daggers, and roared approval. The green men stood silent, but one raised a horn of Rowan and gave a deep sonorous note that rolled along the berm like a tide turning. Lyanna Mormont strode forward, binding fresh gauze to her spear shaft. "Mormonts lead the vanguard," she declared. Arya stepped beside her, blood dried to a crimson mask. "Starks run the shadow." Daenerys mounted Drogon. Rhaegal settled for Jon. Saddles hastily relashed, chains checked. Above, clouds continued to twist, but now dragons ripped them, carving channels of sun. Columns formed, ragged, limping, magnificent. Unsullied banners of gray and red joined Karstark black and white, Mormont green, Stark gray. The waterlogged forges were dismantled, bellows lashed to sleds, drawn by shaggy shore ponies. Gendry refused to leave his anvil, dragging it on a sledge. The Night King watched their exodus, impassive as tombstone. Ice spears closed behind them like teeth. 4 days' march to the shivering shore felt 4 centuries. Snow began on the second day. Soft at first, then needle-keen. The Dragonfire barges rode coastal waves parallel, their forges burning day and night, smoke trailing like black banners. Daenerys and Jon patrolled sky in shifting watch patterns, seeking signs of white scythe bands or fresh lieutenants. None appeared. The dead trailed beyond view, a thundercloud on horizons. On the evening of the 3rd day, the host reached the broken beach, where surf hammered shards of black basalt into pebbles honed like arrowheads. To the east stretched the soundless sea. To the west, white cliffs pocked with abandoned smuggler caves. They built a defensive semicircle of sharpened stakes and tar pit trenches, ring-firing resin. That night Daenerys walked between ranks of sleeping soldiers, cloak tucked tight. She stopped before a small brazier where Tyrion stirred mulled wine. He had arrived by swift horse hours earlier, face pinched from road dust and tension. "I come bearing bad news," he said quietly, pouring her a cup. "Only bad." She managed half a smile. 3 of the 7 hills near King's Landing now burn with blue flame. Cersei harnesses the Night King's sigils. Qyburn's little birds whisper of a final ritual prepared on Aegon's high hill. If completed, they claim, the storm will bend south at her command. Minda. Daenerys exhaled. Chains within chains. Tyrion looked to the dragon sleeping curled near Surf. "Break the head, and the chain rattles apart." She nodded but said nothing. Dawn came mean and red. Frost glimmered on every helmet rim. A hush held camp as final preparations etched trenches, positioned catapults loaded with pitch, and arrayed the dragon chain forges in a semicircle where woods met shore. Smoke coiled into windless air. They felt the dead before they saw them. Ice fog seeped between pines. The sound of many bones clicking arrived like distant hail. Then, white shapes en masse, bodies by the thousands, cresting distant dunes in tidal wave. Towers of ice marched among them. Giants, mammoths long dead, frost spiders gliding on webs of snow dust. At their center rode the Night King on a stallion of coagulated shadow. Spear of glacier crystal raised toward the sky's torn underbelly. Above him circled wyverns made of storm cloud and rime, their wings gusting shards of diamond. Jon and Daenerys mounted dragons. Gendry lit forge braziers. Smiths flew in frantic lanes handing star-glass arrowheads to bowmen. Grey Worm's command bark set, unsullied into phalanx along the tide line. Shields locking, spears extended like steel forest. The Night King halted 200 yards out. Silence blanketed beach, broken only by surf. He lowered his spear. Snow erupted beneath living ranks as buried wights burst upward in ambush. Bodies, once friends slain days before, now weapons. Chaos cracked lines. Yet Dragonfire answered. Rhaegal sweeping low, vomit of emerald flame, incinerating a swath. Where flame met sand, glass fused. But a wyvern of ice plunged, jaws snapping, draining heat. Rhaegal banked. Jon loosed the new sword, now named Dawn Sister by Stark and Targaryen tongues, to slice the wyvern's wing. Ice shattered. Creature spiraled into sea. Across the beach, Arya and Lyanna led a viper-quick raid through under-tunneling wights, severing the necrotic route leading back to the Night King's sorcery. Black ice worms that thrummed beneath sand. Arya's remnant blade sang each time worm flesh parted, spraying frost. Smoke thickened. Pyres of pitch roared. Gendry's forges flung short swords still glowing down lines where last-minute fighters grabbed blades too hot to hold, but wielded anyway. Obsidian keening against bone. Green men played horn call that set the woodline alive. Peat fire trenches burst alight. Blue flame fueled by bog sap, penning flanking whites in furnace lanes. Still the Night King advanced, untouched by arrow or bolt. He strode until he stood upon the fused glass where Rhaegal's flame had kissed sand. There he raised his spear. Lightning the color of dead dawn struck its tip, and lanced skyward piercing cloud. The storm's belly bulged, birthed a pillar of swirling ice that descended, meeting the spear. Power surged. Wind shrieked outward, extinguishing flames, freezing pitch mid-roar dottle. Drogon dove. Daenerys braced. Blue ice exploded from the spear's tip, a hurtling javelin at the dragon's chest. Drogon rolled, but the ice sheared a strip of scale from right flank. Screech of pain ripped the air. Jon cried out, but Rhaegal answered, diving in opposite arc to strike. Green fire, white ice, the two elements collided, shockwave throwing men to sand. Daenerys clung to Drogon's spike, mind churning. Forge rule. Intention shapes steel. Her blood shaped daggers. Could her will shape more? She focused, remembering every life lost. Her brother's cruelty, Khal Drogo's pyre, slave children crucified, the face of the Night King in Bran's visions, every injustice begging redress. Heat roared through veins. She drew a narrow short sword at her belt, blood-forged. With a whisper she flung it skyward, not at the Night King but at the threshold, where ice pillar met storm cloud. The sword flew true, point first. When it pierced the pillar, glyphs blazed, a pulse of violet that rippled through ice like dye in water. The pillar shattered top down, chunks raining. The Night King looked up, his first flicker of surprise in On's. Jon sized moment, urging Rhaegal into steep dive. Blade gleamed a dawn white at edge. He aimed for the Night King's heart. Time slowed. The spear rose to parry. Sword met spear. Valyrian against glacier crystal. The clash birthed light. A blinding coruscation scene at Winterfell's walls, 90 leagues away. In that flare, Arya saw, slit-pupiled, the clash of every prophecy and fear. Steel screamed. The spear splintered lengthwise. The sword shattered halfway, but its broken edge buried in the Night King's breast. Jon wrenched upward, tearing a fissure through rib ice. The Night King staggered. Drogon roared, exhaling black-red inferno. Flames engulfed Night King and dragon both, but Jon held firm. The sword melted inside the Night King, glyphs warping to liquid light. Frost bled from his crown. Ice armor melt dripping away in rivulets that hissed on sand. A howl tore from his throat, echo of 10,000 winters dying. The Night King exploded, not with ice, but with steam that smelled of pine and ancient grief. Every wight on the field dropped, inert. The wyverns dissolved to flurries. The storm overhead slackened, clouds thinning to bruised haze. Silence again. This time eerie, absolute. Then cheers rose, disbelieving, ragged. Jon slid from Rhaegal's neck, knees buckling. Daenerys ran to him. They met at the fused glass plain, where only a scorched crater marked winter's monarch. She held his face, brushes of ash marking cheeks. He smiled, ash crusting lashes. Behind, Gendry sank to knees, weeping in charcoal grime. Ghost howled, long and mournful, but the note ended triumphant. Arya stood over Lyanna, both panting, warrior and child now aged beyond their years. Jorah leaned on his sword, rain washing blood from beard, eyes fixed on Daenerys, with quiet worship. Tyrion arrived, limping on sand, staring at the crater. "Ring the bells," he muttered, then laughed hollow. All the bells. The sea receded calm, tide washing away ash. Dawn proper crested, sun spilling gold across a world newly quiet. Smoke trailed from spent forges like incense. The weirwood isle far behind glowed soft ember, and in King's Landing no blue flame danced. The sigils there had guttered as their master died, leaving only ash to choke the Lion Queen's ambition. Jon gripped Daenerys' hand, felt her pulse strong. "Is it over?" he asked, incredulous. Her gaze swept horizon where clouds broke to reveal a swath of unmarred blue. "First true sky in months. Winter ends," she said, voice hoarse. "But spring we must forge." Cheers rose again, half sobs, half song. Unsullied lifted shattered shields. Stark spearmen rammed sigils into sand that was half molten glass. Dragons coiled beside their riders, wings mantling sunrise. Somewhere, a green man's horn bade final lament. Ancient grief eased. Jon rested forehead to Daenerys. "We bent impossible things," he whispered. "Together," she answered. And above them, dawn blazed on shards of broken ice, melting in first warmth, every droplet carrying reflection of flame and frost united. Two halves of steel folded at last into unbreakable song.